80s, and it had a high reputation for contraband, being able to go in and out of that jail. The old organized crime cases we used to work on there, we would bring in food and stuff like that. It was outrageous what we got away with. Now, they tightened it up a bit, but you can never really, when it's systemic like that, you can never really tighten it up. So there's a lot of corruption in that jail for sure. I know that for a fact. And to have that many clothing, prison outfits in your cell is a total violation. So we know for a fact, for him to have that in there, he was paying off the corrections officers. There's no other way that happens. So for him to have all that contraband in his cell that he's not allowed is definitely an indication that he was making payments while he was in there. Okay, and that's
especially 8 hours after coming off suicide watch. I mean, common sense, they would still have some form of mild, watch on him. Even it's just fresh 8 hours after suicide watch, and they leave him alone in his cell, pulling a gorilla out of his cell all of a sudden, and then leaving him in there all by himself. None of this measures up. But definitely going to listen to that show on the way home today, because those jumpsuits, with the highway bone, with the autopsy done, with the laceration marks on his neck, none of that looks square to me. None of it. And probably to a lot of people as well, who's got some common sense.
Well, a couple of things, to understand about the Department of Corrections in this country, okay, is it's totally corrupt. And to think, well, they're not keeping an eye on him because he's on suicide watch. Trust me, they don't give a damn about that. No one's paying attention. No one's watching. These guards are all just as corrupt as the people they're guarding. I just did a show just this week about Binghamton, New York. 11 inmates up there died since 2011. And what they have a whole system up there that when they lack medical treatment for these inmates, they die, and then they backdate their release date. He didn't die in custody. We let him out 2 days ago when he died. All right? And they got a judge signing on this, so they had a whole system up there going on with that. I had another case in Philadelphia once, about 7 or 8 years ago. We had this guy, his brother was shot and murdered. Okay? We find out the guy that shot and murdered him was an inmate in a prison out on a furlough, and the gun that he shot the guy with came out of a police evidence locker. Okay? So this idea that, whoa, this is so unusual. My God, they're not watching a guy on suicide watch. No one gives a damn. And, he's the most high-profile guy in the world. Everybody in MCC is high-profile. That's why they have all Chapo and stuff like that. So they're all, John Gotti was in there. Everyone in there is high-profile. So
it's their prison, basically. I mean, when it boils down to it, it's their prison. They shift in and shift out the way they want.
Yeah, and there's no oversight for we've proven this thing here in Binghamton where they're backdating this stuff. It's documented, it's proven, but there's no one to report it to. They investigate themselves. There's nothing going on there. So.
Well, I've heard a prominent talk show host that's on daily. I mean, you can find clips, but they have one of the conspiracy guys on there recently, and they were saying that Epstein's still alive. Somebody in the chat room earlier says, could Grisling and Epstein be in Israel right now?
Oh, that would be a likely possibility, yeah. Well, again, too, about Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell. By the way, something, her name is pronounced Ghislaine, but I've been pronouncing it Ghislaine for years, and I know it pisses her off, so let's just keep calling it Ghislaine.
What would you pronounce it?
Ghislaine. But let's keep calling it Ghislaine, man.
I like Ghislaine better.
Yeah,
I'll go with that.
Because women hate when you get their name wrong. Every woman hates that.
Well, she shouldn't have put that S in her name if she didn't want people mispronouncing it. So,
yeah. Well, anyway, what happened was last week Hoffenberg came on the show with this theory. He had spoken to someone who was kind of an expert in these areas. He's got a whole team going on there. This guy's got it's like a pit bull with a bone or one of those pig's ears going after Maxwell and that $600 million. Because he wants revenge against Epstein because they totally screwed this guy when they threw him in prison over the Ponzi scam. Because Epstein was up to his neck in that stuff, and he walked free. And Hoffenberg did 9 years in serious federal prisons, man. He's a born-again Christian now, too. This guy, he's a good guy. I can't say he's a good guy, but
he had a connection, of course, we talked about this last time, but the connection with Giuliani. Right, and kind of shifted his opinion towards Epstein for some reason or another. But that's how far back that this guy has been part of intelligence.
Giuliani was corporate counsel for Tower Financial, and he sided, and he took the whole Justice Department with him over to Epstein's side to make Hoffenberg the scapegoat. But he comes on the show last week, and he was talking to this expert in this kind of area, and he presented me the theory that Maxwell was already dead, and it made perfect sense. I says, you know what, man, you're right. I says, wow, that makes perfect sense. Maxwell listens to the show. Maxwell hears the show. She calls up her representative, Goldman, her longtime best friend and spokesperson here in the States. She contacts Hoffenberg and says, hey, man, Ghislaine's alive. Okay. Now, so she's come back to us claiming she's alive. Now, we don't know this for 100% fact because there's been no proof of life. And Hoffenberg's working on a Skype connection or something like that where we can actually see if she's alive, an untraceable kind of connection. But
is she following you around? Is she trolling you?
That's a good question because Hoffenberg thinks that she's making statements publicly that they're untouchable and she's under protection. And so Hoffenberg also thinks that's the reason why those Bill Clinton photos were being released of Bill Clinton on Epstein's plane. Now, I know a little bit about that, okay, because your audience may know, they may not know. Back in 2016, I was hired as the private investigator in a lawsuit, the Katie Johnson lawsuit, the one against Epstein and Trump. They were co-defendants in that case. That was my case. I was a PI in that case. So when we were shopping around bringing that case, because we needed to bring in co-counsel, because the original attorney, Tom Mayer, who's an excellent attorney, that just wasn't his specialty. So we contacted all the major law firms everywhere to bring in competent co-counsel, and no one turned down this case, by the way. A lot of people poo-poo this case, but none of these major law firms had any problem with taking this case. This was a good case. It had been vetted out to that point. This was a legit case, just like I vetted out many, many cases. I got a case against Disney right now that I vetted out that's 100% successful. Okay, so trust me. Now, the thing is, though, so we were vetting this out, and I made one phone call to this one lawyer, and he goes, Ed, is that thing going on with they're trying to sell those pictures of Trump and those porn stars and Clinton on that plane? So I know for a fact, okay, that whoever's selling those pictures that have been withheld since they were around since 2016. It happened like in 2008, but those pictures were for sale in 2016. And they were covered up. They're just like the book came out, the Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, by the way, who also confirms my Epstein lawsuit and interviewed Lisa Bloom. Those pictures were a package. Whoever owned and controlled those pictures was selling them as a package. And now we have released the ones with Trump are being withheld, but the ones with Clinton are being released. Now, that's all I can tell you with the facts. You have to conclude why. I think it's because Trump is still spreading money around. I think he's got people working for him right now that are 100 times better than Michael Cohen ever was, going out there fixing stuff for him and cleaning things up and spreading around a lot of money. I think we talked about John Tino the last time I was on your show.
I noticed one of the characters under his administration that got him elected the first time, Steve Bannon's been making the circuit as of late. And I think he was just recently over in Italy helping them out with their elections, so spreading the money around. There's a question that's coming out of the chat, and maybe you can help us with it. It's on Ghislaine. There was a photo recently that came out, and you've probably spoken on it, about her being at a coffee shop with a book and supposedly saying something on the CIA. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I can tell you something about that because I was on the phone. I'm going to tell you his name. I was on the phone with Dan O'Hanks when it came out, okay? Dan O'Hanks was the original private investigator who was hired by the British tabloids way back in the beginning when all we had was the search warrant affidavits of Epstein's mansion. They gave those affidavits to him and whatever available paperwork there was. And Dan O'Hanks, okay, is the man who located all these victims. He's the one that located Virginia Roberts and identified her because their names were redacted. He figured out their names from school information and court information, and he tracked these girls down. He tracked them down. He convinced them to go interview with the tabloids. That's how all this got started, guys. Dan O'Hanks is the guy who found the flight logs and the little black book, and all that work, okay, belongs to this one man. It's been taken credit for by a lot of other people, okay? Now, I have all his... He sent me all his case files. I got all his stuff for free. He's selling it all over the place, but I got it. Okay, now, about that, and now get this. I'm on the phone with Dan O'Hanks about something totally different. And he goes, wait a minute, Ed, because, he works with the tabloids and stuff like that, and so National Enquirer, all that stuff. And he goes, hey, Ed, man, they just spotted Ghislaine Maxwell at an In-N-Out, a hamburger place in California. And I said, oh, really? Yeah. And I'm looking, I'm Googling away. Nothing. There's nothing on there yet, right? On the news yet about it. But Dano got tipped off about it. And now we find out that that's a staged photo, okay? So it was a staged photo, but they were kind of planting it in. You know what I'm saying? Okay, like in the mix here. You know, so you got to look at everything twice.
I'm going to take a shameful plug. Grilling, Maxwell, if you're listening to Ed this morning on Now UCTV's Cutting Edge, tomorrow there's a call-in show. If you'd like to call in, Mr. Maxwell, the number is 563-999-3558. So, Miss Maxwell, if you feel like calling into the Cutting Edge, I mean, call in.
Yeah.
We'll talk with you.
Oh, real quick, you mentioned, I know I'm rambling, I'm all over the place, but I just woke up. And the thing about Steve Bannon, you mentioned Steve Bannon. You got to remember, man, Steve Bannon was really good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, okay? We knew he had that one meeting where he was photographed coming out of Epstein's house, but we found out since that they were very close friends, and they used to go to dinner all the time. And the one time invited to that dinner was that guy Wolf, who wrote that book. That he was embedded in the White House and he wrote that big book, Turns out he's also buddies with Epstein and is on Epstein's flight logs. So Bannon and Epstein are very, very close. And Bannon, by the way, too, remember when Roy Moore was running for office down there and Ivanka Trump started complaining about it because Roy Moore was diddling all these little girls when he was a prosecutor and stuff. They got banned from the mall for chasing around little teenage girls. And Ivanka was complaining about that. And Steve Bannon is quoted in public saying, well, what about her father and that little 13-year-old girl? He's talking about my lawsuit. So Bannon, who's friends with Trump, who's friends with Epstein, believes my lawsuit.
So I take it you don't buy President Trump's story where he kicked him out of, I guess it was in Mar-a-Lago?
No, we've traced that down. That comes back to Patterson came up with that story first. And it's been kind of circulated too as well by Brad Edwards.
I told you guys my theory on that, right? That Trump isn't just somebody that's been blackmailed. Like, he is actually a part of the... Yes. Wider web of what's doing it, and I think obviously deception's a very important part of warfare. It always has been. If anybody's read The Art of War, anybody that's read any books on warfare, and intelligence agencies use these weapons to the highest degree, always. And I think we're seeing. Personally, I think we're seeing the rise of the ultimate intelligence agency right in front of our eyes. And not that it hasn't been the ultimate for a while, but we're seeing it just kind of take over, because I feel like obviously there's two different sides to the intelligence world. From what I understand, and I could be wrong, I don't know, obviously I'm just some guy sitting in Indiana doing a show right now, but I've heard people tell me things that there's two sides. There's two different agendas at play among the elites, and there's two different dogs, I guess, jockeying for that position. So anyways, that's my theory. I'm throwing it out there. What do you guys think?
I agree that Trump has been using blackmail throughout his life, and because he came out of Roy Cohn, and I'm sure he inherited a lot of that Roy Cohn blackmail. He owns a bunch of hotels and casinos. You see him throwing these golf tournaments with porn stars walking around all over the place. So he knows how to do this. By the way, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, father, Charles Kushner, went to prison because he wanted to donate money to Democrats so badly. He wanted to donate money so badly that he created all these straw organizations and people to funnel money into the Democratic Party. And he got arrested for that. He was under investigation. His own brother-in-law turned informant against him. And his solution to this was to hire some teenage Russian hookers, send them over to his brother-in-law's house, videotape it, and blackmail his brother. Now, I don't know about you, but if my daughter wants to marry a kid and this kid's father is blackmailing with teenage Russians, I'd kind of say, hey, honey, man, that family's a little, I don't know. Do we want to get involved with that family? But no, man, Trump thinks Jared Kushner's the most brilliant man he's ever met. Puts him in charge of everything.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Seriously interesting.
Talking to the mic there, John, if you don't mind, I just want to make sure we
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You can hear you fine just when you're talking into the mic. When you got your head turned away, it's a little harder. So.
Well, I'll tell you, at home, Patricia's going to give me one of those rocker arms so I can get used to it.